Welcome back. Richard, it's good to see you again.
Nice to be seen. No, it's good to see you too, even if it's by video only.
That's right. But today we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that, because today we're going to talk about the anxiety that so many people are feeling over getting what they have been wanting for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit ironic. We've been hoping and praying and waiting for this for over a year, and suddenly, at least in this country, we're close to achieving. we're allowed to go out again. We're close to it, looking at the end, maybe at the end of this thing, and all of a sudden, it's making people a little bit anxious. Now what do we do? Be careful what you wish for, sort of feeling in the air.
This might be
But there is this buzz in the air that maybe the cloud is lifting.
Yeah. And it's it's a fascinating, thing to watch. And experience with our patients, because we're talking to them and working with them, and we have been through the whole pandemic and everything. And all along, they've been talking about, so many people have talked about wanting to get back to normals, to stop wearing masks, to be able to go where we want to go and do what we want to do. And now that those opportunities are starting to surface, it is fascinating how many people are really experiencing a lot of distress about this.
That's right.
Who haven't driven. There are people who haven't driven in a year.
Exactly.
Everything delivered, and now they're just. And it's interesting how much anxiety there is about that.
Yeah, we've replaced these phrases like, I have to wear a mask. Okay, every place we went for a year, I have to wear a mask. Now it's, well, where do I wear my mask?
Right.
Not whether I wear it, but where am I supposed to wear it? And we say, well, you're allowed to go out. You're allowed to, if you have the 2 doses of the vaccine, you're allowed to go. Well, but am I allowed to? How big is the room? When they say don't be in how big a room am I allowed to be in?
Right.
And who's allowed to be there? And there's all these questions that come with reopening that none of us, I don't think any of us anticipated.
Well, one of the elementary schools that I work at is hosting summer school for elementary students, and we were told that for the rest of this school year, we had everybody on campus was supposed to wear masks. And so, but the big question was, okay, is summer school considered this past school year, or is it coming school year? And so there was a big thing. And just as the school year ended, and just before summer school started, there was a board meeting, and now they're saying that you don't have to.
You don't have to wear. What did they say? They were optional.
Yeah, you can wear them if you want, if you feel more comfortable wearing them, but if you don't have to.
And so you have the same situation. If you have children of school age, it's okay, I can't send my kids back to school. And this year it's going to be, is it really safe to send my kids back to school? Because no one's going to be masked, or few people will be masked. And then you have to decide, do I send my child back? Do I send my child back with a mask? How do I do this? So there are all these questions now that are confronting us as we reopen.
Absolutely. And even though the vaccinations, again, here in the United States at least, we're giving out lots of vaccinations every day, millions every day. And a large percentage of our population is fully vaccinated.
Right.
We're hoping that that we're approaching that end that you were talking about before. But again, just that anxiety, we hear the report about new variants popping up in different places. What is it? The Delta variant.
Delta variant, right.
No, and there's so much stress about that. Okay, so do we need to be careful of that, or do we, is our vaccinations going to protect us from those variants as well? And there's so many unknowns.
Right. Yeah, the vaccines were the great changer. That's what really changed everything with vaccines. And in our country, we're as you said, about 3 million doses a day of the vaccine. Um, and so we have about 42% of the US citizens have had both doses. The reason both doses are important is because the new variant, the Delta variant, you're only going to get protection if you have both doses.
Right.
So you're going to have to get the two, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer, in order to get protection against the Delta. Why? The Delta is important. We're seeing what's happening in India right now. We see this, India's going through this terrible surge, about 6,000 people a day. And our rate of vaccination, fully vaccinated, is 42%. In India, it's 3.5%. Okay?
Right.
So you can see the relationship between the vaccine and the occurrence of the illness. So the vaccines are working, but they're only going to work if they're available. And right now, the G7 nations are meeting in England, and one of the commitments they're making is, and especially I think the United States has taken the lead in this, is that we are going to be giving away millions of vaccines. Now, those vaccines have to get to those countries and then get distributed. But this is the way to beat the disease. And no matter who you talk to, they say the same thing. It's not enough. You can't isolate the United States with vaccines. This is a worldwide pandemic. The Delta variant, and a variant is just a change, in a tiny change in the structure. We're pretty sure that the vaccine, that to be fully vaccinated will protect you from it, because the Delta vaccine, the Delta variant, there are about 5 variants circulating in the world right now. Delta is the one we hear most about because it is in England, it is in India, it is now in the UK, and the UK could possibly be facing another shutdown this summer, another lockdown this summer. And it is in 2 states. I think it's in Arizona and Georgia. I think the 2 states in the United States now has the Delta variant. So for all the people who don't want to get vaccinated, they're once again at risk. And we could spread that variant of this at least to the unvaccinated. And we're talking about, what, 48% of the country isn't vaccinated yet.
Right. Yeah, and I think that 2 pieces to it is that one is that variants are not abnormal. I mean, even with the flu, every year we get so many people get the flu vaccine, but yeah, some people still get the flu, and that's because the vaccine is really only for one variant of the influenza.
That's right.
And sometimes we catch the other variant.
That's right. And the reason we get a flu shot every year is every year you're dealing with a little different variant of the flu. And so that's why you're encouraged. So you're getting it. The vaccine is a little bit different each year, depending on what kind of flu we're going to be facing.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I think we have to be mindful of, because we'll see so many different numbers as it relates to the number of people who have been vaccinated. Because remember, every time that we sort of expand the people who are allowed to get the vaccine, we're increasing the number of possible vaccines. And so when we talk about 47%, of course, that now includes younger adults and teenagers. Now they are eligible to get the vaccine. So, you'll see the percentage of people who are fully vaccinated go up and down, but it has to do with what population or what group of people you're talking about. So,
and the other interesting thing, the other interesting legal question is, can people be forced to be vaccinated by the workplace? And that is working its way through case law. And there was a case settled last week, a large hospital in Texas, and the judge, about 100 staff members were saying, you can't terminate us if we don't get vaccinated. And the judge threw out that case and said, no, they have a right to terminate you. You've been told that this is a condition of returning to work, and they have a right to do that. So, but there'll be other cases in other states, and I don't know whether that will go to the Supreme Court or not, because the workers are going to challenge the finding. But it remains a complicated issue. So while the vaccinations have finally presented us with what might be the light at the end of the tunnel with this pandemic, it's only true for the United States right now, and other countries who have the pandemic under control. And it's only it's only available, it's only going to work where the vaccines are available, okay? And despite the fact that we're probably turning a corner, it's not always easy. It's not going to be easy, we're learning. It's not always going to be easy to adjust to what we have frequently referred to as the new normal.
Right.
We talk, there was no, can't be new if it's, you know. And so we're finding that it's not going to be easy adjusting to the post-pandemic conditions. You know, in Florida, we have the whole cruise ship controversy. You know, would you take a cruise right now?
Right.
You know, you know, we'd like to, but should we?
Yeah.
And so I think every state is facing those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the American Psychological Association recently
Right.
did a survey, and they found that about half of the people who responded feel uneasy about that readjustment.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In person, face to face interactions. And you know, we get questions from patients often about, you know, when are we coming back to face to face? And you know, it's again a very interesting study of human behavior to look at. There are people and therapists who go right out and they're already face to face going back, and there's many of us who are, you know, still doing virtual. There are parents who are adamant that their kids are going to remain in e-learning, virtual learning, and there are those who are ready to get their kids back into school. And so that is pretty significant, and people feel very strongly about their position. But again, the APA found that half of the people who were surveyed said that they felt uneasy about it.
Right. And this came as a bit of a surprise, I think, to both of us when, you know, because we have such enthusiasm for reopening, for being able to go out again and being able to go to restaurants or to go to theme parks or just to be able to be with other people again. And we assumed that there would be this euphoria, like the war is over kind of euphoria where there's dancing in the street. And yet here's this anxiety now about, well, wait a minute, I very much want to, but am I really safe? And so it's created anxiety. And this is what the APA poll found is that, yeah, a lot of people are feeling pretty anxious about exactly how do I re-enter.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And so what this is triggering in many people is a lot of stress and some anxiety as it relates to this transition.
Right.
And so one of the things we want to talk about in the podcast is, you know, what is driving that anxiety and what we need to do to deal with it and to cope with that anxiety so that we can make this adjustment and get back to you know, living life as fully as possible.
Right, right. And getting back to doing those things that we've missed
Right.
for the past year, right? And so the podcast, much as the first part of this podcast is based on a conversation, sort of an interview that APA did with Ellen Hendrickson,
Yeah.
who is a PhD in Boston University Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders. And she happens to be an expert in anxiety and especially interventions for anxiety. And so APA went to the expert and said, hey, wait a minute, can you explain, can we talk to you about the anxiety associated with reopening after the pandemic? And so the first part of this comes from that interview with her.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, as it starts, you know, talking about what drives anxiety, where does anxiety come from, and anxiety is different than stress, right? Stress is a normal, common, needed experience that we have that lets us know that something is worrisome, that we need to do something.
Right.
When you're stressed about a test that you have to take, that stress is sort of telling you that this is something important, you need to take some action. If you're feeling stress about a trip you have to take, you know, it's telling you that you need to be prepared and that you need to do these things.
Right.
Anxiety is different. Anxiety is, but because that stress is about something real, something that's
Mhm.
actually happening. It's like fear. If there's a snake in front of you, fear is a real thing because that snake
Mhm.
is really there. Anxiety is something much less tangible. It's something that is more anticipatory. It's
Right.
things that are uncertain that we can't really put our hands on, but it's a very real sensation, very real
Mhm.
experience.
Right. Yeah, stress is an engineering term,
Right.
and there's a very real thing happening that could break the system. Um, anxiety is anxiety is a little bit different. As you say, it's a more generalized feeling, and not a specific stimulus creating the anxiety.
Right.
Right. And so, what Dr. Hendrickson says, the first question was, "What's driving the anxiety?" And she said the main thing is uncertainty.
Right.
And I thought that was a good place to begin because that's in this case, in the case of COVID, there's a great deal of uncertainty.
Right. Yeah. And uncertainty about who's it safe to be around. I went to the grocery
Right.
store yesterday, and I would say maybe at least half the people aren't wearing masks anymore.
Do you wear a mask when you go in the grocery store?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But
But most don't.
I'm walking around, and a lot of people didn't, and it's um remember that uncertainty, that sort of self-consciousness that you had when we first started wearing masks back in
Right. Right.
last year.
Hmm.
As soon as you start paying attention to that, you start feeling that again. It's like, wait, why am I the only one?
Wearing a mask.
I mean, I still keep it on, of course, but
Right.
but it's that strange feeling because you don't know who has been vaccinated, who hasn't been vaccinated. We still don't even understand why some people get COVID and other people don't. You can
No.
have a family of 5 people, one person gets it and nobody else in the house.
And how many spouses? Where you have a married couple, one gets it and one doesn't.
Right.
There's no explanation for that.
Mm.
I mean, no, we don't have one yet. So
Right.
the uncertainty comes from, first of all, you don't know who is and who isn't vaccinated. We're on an honor system. Somebody can say, yes, I'm vaccinated, and they may not be. Because some people it depends where they are. Some people are embarrassed to say, no, I'm not going to get the vaccine, so they don't admit it. And then the other question about why some people get it and some don't. Is it really okay to return to the office? People say, well, get ready. I think Facebook announced yesterday that workers would be expected to return by,
Mm.
I think, July or sometime this summer. And so prepare because you're coming back to the office soon. And the first question is it really safe for me to return? Because that's going to be an enclosed space, which we've been told to avoid for the past year. And so is it really safe to return? I was looking this up the other day about reopening, and the first 2 or 3 pages are all about advice about reopening offices. So this is a huge
Yeah.
issue that companies are struggling with. How do we do? Workers and companies are struggling with this issue. Um, and then the other issue is the vaccine really enough to protect me? Am I really protected?
How long
Um,
does it last?
and how long does it last? Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then again, the whole thing with the masks, and the variants. We talked about the variants earlier because that is, that's going to be ever evolving because as you know, as we talked about with the flu a few minutes ago, it is probable that the virus is going to continue to evolve and um, mutate, and there's going to be other variants that pop up at different
Right.
times, maybe every year, the way
Right.
the flu does. And so, we're going to have to stay on top of this, and we have no idea what's going to happen as it relates to our vaccinations. And
Right. Yeah. Because the reason that Fauci and Biden and all these people are saying, let's get everybody vaccinated, is we have to snuff this thing out. Okay. The longer that it circulates, the more likely it will mutate. That's the whole problem here is that people say, well, I'm not going to get vaccinated. Okay, you're not, but that means the virus is allowed to continue circulating. Even if it's in 20 or 30% of the population, the virus remains in circulation, and it's only a matter of time until it will change. It will mutate, and you're going to have a variant. And that's what happened in India. They had this Delta variant. It was first detected in December of 2020, so 6 months ago. It now represents 91% of the cases in the UK. So now it's not just India that's going to be affected, it's also the UK. It's only 6% of the cases in the United States. But if we get to 90% of cases, now we're talking about another pandemic, okay? This variant is much more lethal and causes much more severe medical problems. 6,000 a day are dying in India. And also you can get a rundown of the symptoms. It's a multi-system problem. Almost every body system is affected. And one of the things they talk about is people get blood clots, and those are dangerous. But also, it's 60% more transmissible. So it's easier to get this one, and it causes far more illness and much higher death rates. So this is, we should be very careful, but it creates uncertainty because this variant is in the country, and it's possible that we get other variants the Delta variant isn't resistant to the vaccine, but you need both doses. So people who only have one are still only 30% protection.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole issue of the myths and versus the facts related to kids.
Right. That's right. That's a difficult one.
To the age of 12. And for those of us who work in elementary schools, there's a lot of people who work in elementary schools,
right,
who are with and exposed to these to kids birth to 12 every day. And if you think about the past year, we have gone from, well, kids can't get it. Remember that?
Right. Yeah, right.
That was interesting. And then if the kids can get it, but they can't give it to adults. And so all of these different myths, but the reality is that kids can get it. For the most part, kids, from what we have seen with the prevalence and what's been reported, kids that are healthy, that have no pre-existing conditions or anything, there haven't been any deaths in childhood unless there were pre-existing conditions.
That's right.
Healthy children don't experience a lethal version of the COVID. So
right.
Yeah.
But there are deaths in children who get this multi-system inflammatory syndrome that attacks the heart.
Yeah.
There are kids who have died of that. So you don't need to protect children from COVID, but should we protect them against this other condition, this other consequence of getting the virus?
Yeah, that was the syndrome that a student at one of my schools got.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the student had come to school, elementary school. He had come to school every day. So he started experiencing some problems and everything, went to the hospital, was diagnosed with MIS. And so they're saying he had COVID, had absolutely no symptoms of COVID. We had no idea. He'd been coming to school every day.
Right.
But it was the MIS that he had problems with. He recovered and he came back. He went back home and he came back to school. But it's a huge issue.
No, that's the problem in children is MIS. And what we've also learned is that where adult vaccination rates are high, transmission rates in children are low. So the best way to protect children from whatever, whether it's MIS or COVID, is for the adults around them to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's the birth to 12 group. And there are a number of articles now appearing about whether you should or whether you shouldn't. Right. The other group are teenagers and young adults. So we have birth to 12, and then we have teens to young adults. And the problem here is there are some cases of heart problems, heart muscle problems after the vaccine. I guess several hundred cases have been reported. And the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices is going to have a meeting this coming week to study this correlation between these heart muscle problems and the vaccine, to see if there is a relationship and what that relationship might be.
Right.
Okay. So the vaccinations and the uncertainty about children is a little bit more complex, a little less clear.
Right.
In adults, it's fairly clear: get a vaccination, get both doses. With children, it's a little more complicated, and we're still studying it. And we're going to have to decide over the next few months. I think the summer is going to be a good test ground for not wearing masks in school, and then to see what the rates of infection are.
Absolutely, and I think that as we're wrapping up this whole the whole issue of uncertainty and how uncertainty is contributing to the anxiety we feel, are the ridiculous things, right? And I'm surprised to hear some of the things that people that I know, who are smart people, who come up with some of these things, like that the vaccines that Bill Gates has put microchips in the vaccines, or that getting the shots leaves metal in your system after you get the shot. It's remarkable the types of things that people will say or believe that prevent them from looking at the science and the reality of what's happening around us.
There was actually a physician who testified, I think in Ohio, about this magnetism business. I mean, I know where this stuff comes from. My mom said, I don't know where this stuff, I know where it comes from. And she testified that, yeah, you can get, metal will stick to your body after you get a vaccine. And now there's a whole series of TikTok videos of people showing that, yeah, look, this stuck to my arm. And somebody said, yeah, if you smear slime or honey on your arm, the quarter will stick to it, or the nickel will stick to it. There's nothing in the vaccine that has metal in it. So it can't do that, because there's nothing in it that's magnetic. It's like putting a piece of cotton on your arm.
Right.
It's not going to do that. But this stuff, these conspiracy theories, make people anxious, make people uncertain.
Right. And why would it be different for the vaccines, for the metal, than it would be for any other shot that you get?
Right. They're non-ferrous substances. They're not going to do that.
Right.
So, anyway, so we have uncertainty about vaccines and am I going to be safe? A second reason we're uncertain, we've never done this before.
Right.
The last time we did this was 1918. And so nobody is alive today who went through that. But we had variants in 1918, 1919. It was the variant that was the most lethal. Okay. Right. So we've done this before, but nobody was alive who did this before. And so we're doing this. We are quite literally feeling our way through this. And we are sort of testing things to see what works, testing things to see if there's a relationship. We simply don't know. We've never done this before. And so that creates anxiety. And the third reason there's anxiety is because we're all tired.
Right. Yeah.
We're depleted. Everybody is exhausted. Everybody's suffering from some, depending on how directly you were affected by this virus. In Florida, we continued doing our work in Florida. We were able to go online. Okay. We were fortunate because we were able to continue our work. You were able to continue your work in the schools. Right. Okay. But there were many people who were really locked down and locked out, and they had a very different experience. And so, but to one, if you were locked down, you have anxiety because you were isolated. If you were able to work, you have anxiety because you were exposing yourself to danger every day. Okay. And so different people have different reasons, but we all have reasons to be anxious. We all have reasons. We're exhausted by this thing. It's been a very long year. We've had the pandemic, we've had social unrest, and we have the election nightmare that continues and and there's all that business about who's president of the United States. I mean, all this adds to the anxiety. Okay, so there's three reasons why we have the anxiety.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so let's think a little bit about how we should handle some of this anxiety, because we feel a lot of discomfort, we feel a lot of stress, we feel a lot of um, anxiety related to this uncertainty that we've been talking about.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about how maybe we should handle some of this anxiety.
That's right. And the first thing is that there are still people out there. So even though you and I might re-enter the world, we have to remember that there are people who, no matter what, are not able to re-enter. And the largest group is anybody who is immune system compromised. The immunocompromised still are not going to be free
Right.
to do whatever they want. If you have an immune system problem, if you're being treated for some disease that reduces your immune response, you're still going to have to be very, very careful. And the people around you are going to have to be very, very careful. So yeah, there's a good reason to feel some anxiety if there's a possibility that you're going to be around people who are immunocompromised.
Right. Yeah. Another thing that we have to keep in mind related to the anxiety is that because everything has been virtual, because we have been remote for so long, um, sometimes our social skills are a little bit rusty. We don't really we haven't really honed those skills for the past year. So, keeping in mind that that not only are our social skills a little bit rusty, but so are other people's. And
The
so
people's, right.
how
Mhm.
we're communicating with each other, how we're interacting, that nervousness when you go to shake somebody's hand and then, oh wait, do I say a fist bump or do I do an elbow or what am I doing? Everybody's experiencing that. And
Right.
the more times we put ourselves in those situations, the more comfortable we get with it. But
Mhm.
that uncertainty and that nervousness is going to be there at the beginning.
Yeah, people who are a little, if you think about the spectrum from a little bit shy to severe social anxiety, so we have the spectrum of people. You don't have to have social anxiety, a diagnosis of social anxiety, to be reluctant to reenter. If you're a little bit shy, many people, and you and I'm sure you had school-age children who said, "I'm glad I don't have to go to school because I'm not going to get bullied. I'm not going to get teased. I don't have to worry about how I look. I don't have to worry about what clothes I have." They were happy not, but now they have to re-enter. Now they have to face the demons again. So even for those kids who are a little bit shy or a little bit insecure, they enjoyed the isolation. Now they have to re-enter. And then you have people who do have diagnosable anxiety disorders, and it's going to be extremely difficult for them to re-enter. Okay, so we all are rusty, but some of us are going to have a much harder time re-entering than others.
Yeah. And so it's really important that we sort of normalize that. We recognize, okay, everybody's feeling this, everybody's a little bit uncertain, everybody's feeling a little bit awkward. And so, sort of normalize it by accepting it and acknowledging it and laughing about it. Laughing about it can be a great
Right. Hmm.
way to overcome it. But the more that we deny it, the more that it's going to accelerate and increase. So
Right. And I think I really like that last phrase of normalizing the uncertainty. We are all feeling a little uncertain. We're feeling a little awkward. Um, and go ahead and admit that. And because we're all to some extent, we're all going to be struggling with reentry. So go ahead and laugh about it. You're right. You reach out your hand. Should I shake hands? Does this person want to be touched? And so go ahead and laugh about it. It's going to take us a while to get what might some people might refer to as get our sea legs back. It takes a little bit of time. So don't fret too much about it. We're all struggling.
absolutely. So it's going to feel awkward at first. There's a lot of different ways to do this, whether it's starting out with family, starting out with friends, starting out at the grocery store. I went up to one of my schools the other day, even though it's summertime, and there were people up there, and so I went in and I didn't wear a mask there, and so it was just kind of getting accustomed to that a little bit because I knew there would only be a few people there, and
Right. Mhm.
I knew that the people that were there had their vaccines.
Mhm.
And so but it's, still a little bit, is just towing into the water just a little bit. But so you
Right.
don't have to jump in.
No, no,
And
there's no hurry, you know. And she talks about there are many points of reentry. For many people, it doesn't affect us in Florida as much, but if you live in a city, you're going to have your first subway ride,
right,
your first bus ride, your first Uber, your first, you know, you re-enter the office, you go into stores again, you go to bars and restaurants again. So there are going to be many times, many um, venues. You know, is it okay to go to sporting events?
right,
You know, when I go to, so there are many ways you're going to be re-entered, and each is going to have its challenges.
right.
So don't be in any hurry, and it's going to recur.
And be okay with the fact that you're going to be rusty. You know, it's okay.
Right.
You're going to get those skills back. You're gonna remember. Oh, that's right. That's how I do things. That's why we do it.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I forgot about that.
That's right.
Right.
You'll recalibrate. You'll get back to it. Because
Mhm.
we all need social interactions.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
we need to share it with others. We need to receive it from others. We all need that. And so um, getting back to that is really important. Just don't rush. Um, you know, let your
Mhm.
body adjust to it, and
Yeah, your brain will recalibrate. I mean, it's going to take time, but it'll recalibrate. But remember, each time you enter a new situation, you're going to have to adjust to the new situation, whether it's going into a restaurant without a mask or going into a doctor, no matter where you go, getting on public transportation, flying in an airplane. I have to take at least 3 trips sometime this year. And I am very anxious about getting on an airplane. You know, I, I don't, is it really safe? People say, oh yeah, it's not a problem. That doesn't cure my anxiety yet.
right,
Okay.
right.
Right. So, but I'm going to have to deal with it. It's probably worth pushing yourself. If you're fully vaccinated, if you have both doses, you're fully vaccinated, you're probably safe.
Right.
Because the variants haven't arrived in troublesome numbers yet. Okay, so in the United States, so it's probably okay, but you're still going to be a bit anxious.
Right. And
Okay.
I think that this brings us to another point that we should make, and that is, the again, we kind of go back to the American Psychological Association, and they're talking about this idea of second pandemic.
I
Um,
love, yeah. Mhm.
it's like, okay, but before we get nervous about that, the second pandemic is the stress,
Right. Mhm.
is the aftermath of COVID-19 and how we're responding to it. And while that physical threat has been addressed, while we've dealt with, or we're in the process of dealing with the physical threat of the virus and all of that, now we have the stress that comes from all of the aftermath, whether it's the reentry stuff that we've been talking about, or just the physical and emotional consequences of the past year.
Right.
Um, you know, the past year has changed us physically, psychologically. It's changed us in a lot of different ways.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. And I like the idea of a second pandemic. We're through the physical, at least in the United States, and we're through the physical part of this. Okay. The physical threat has really diminished because of the vaccinations. Okay. That's, we know that. But now we face the long-term consequences to our physical and mental health because we have both physical and mental health concerns. For example, 42% of adults gained more weight than they intended. The average weight gain was 29 pounds.
Right.
That's really significant.
Right.
You know, I think I'm under 29. I think I'm under 29 pounds, but I'm way over what I wanted.
Right.
And from a health standpoint, if you gain 11 pounds, and remember the average is more than twice that. If you gain just 11 pounds, you increase your risk for type 2 diabetes and heart disease.
Right.
And if you gain 25 pounds, your risk of stroke increases. Okay.
Right.
So these are not the weight gain, which we sort of laugh about, you know, the weight gain um, that is the subject, the object of many jokes that are circulating, has serious health consequences.
Right.
Okay, and you're going to have to deal with that. AARP, which you don't know about yet. They published in one of their recent publications, they listed a whole, there were pages and pages, article after article, about getting this stuff under control, which would be particularly important for people age 50 and over. Okay, that we got to come to terms with this stuff.
Absolutely. And weight gain is one thing, but about a quarter of people are drinking more alcohol than they were
Right.
over before the pandemic. And about 2/3 of people are getting less sleep.
Sleep, right?
Sleep
Mhm.
is a huge issue.
Right.
And then just access to services. People. There's a comedian on that has a show on Netflix, and one of the things he talks about is, he had an appointment back in March of last year, and it got postponed, and he hasn't had the appointment yet,
Right.
because there was a year or so that, how do you go to the doctor? Does it make sense for what I'm going through to have a virtual session with your doctor? And so there's a lot of canceled or postponed healthcare services and appointments. So it's, there's a lot of other things, not just weight gain, but more alcohol, less sleep, not as much healthcare. A lot of
Mhm.
things are happening.
Bernie, you remember when I had my surgery back a few years ago,
Yeah.
and how, the pain that I remember, because you and I would do podcasts, and I'd have to get up
Right.
during because of the pain. Had that happened this past year, I would have had to delay that surgery
Right.
and live with that pain.
Right.
And you know how
Yeah.
acute it was, because we were seeing each other every day then.
Yeah.
Um, but there are other diseases where time is really, really important.
Absolutely.
Okay, and there are people who have had diagnostic procedures delayed
Hmm.
while the disease, and unbeknownst to them, the disease was active. Okay, so these are not insignificant issues, but they add to the stress.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
so
And so I think one way that we will sort of pull the podcast together and kind of wrap up is talking about, we've talked about the stress and anxiety and all of these things that we're experiencing. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about what it looks like, so we know if you yourself is experiencing any of these things, or if somebody else is experiencing these things, and what impact this is having on us.
right.
Um, and this is another article from the American Psychological Association about the psychological impact of COVID-19, and how do we recognize some of those things.
Right. And you talked about anxiety. If you think you're struggling, if you're struggling with anxiety, it's a persistent, excessive worry. Okay, it goes on and on and on, and it's excessive. It's way beyond what it should be.
And
You have difficulty concentrating. You have sleep problems, and you're just sort of generally on edge.
right,
That suggests that it might be an anxiety problem, and you should probably seek advice or help.
right. And most of the time, a person recognizes that the anxiety is excessive.
Mhm,
They'll say
mhm.
things like, "I know I don't need to worry about this as much as I do, but I can't help it."
Right, right. I just can't get rid of this feeling. So yeah, that probably you're struggling with a little anxiety, and you may want to get some assistance.
Right. Now, that compared to like a panic attack is like a sudden, like,
Right,
attack. We use attack for that purpose. It's like it comes upon a person, and it has physical characteristics, so sweating and shaking and difficulty breathing and
mhm,
those kinds of things. Your heart rate significantly increases, and there's like this feeling of dread or fear of that you're gonna have a heart attack.
have another one, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's a sudden onset, and it's very clear and delineated from other functioning.
Right,
But you're anxious, but then you have a panic attack, and you know that's different than the anxiety.
right, right. And then there's signs of depression. And with depression, I think the key with depression is there's some significant change that occurs, either a weight gain or you're not sleeping. There's some significant difference. And I
Mhm.
think that's a sign that it might be depression.
Right. Yeah, and one of the bigger predictors of depression, is that certainly it's sadness, but it's also the difficulty finding pleasure in anything, even things that
Right.
we usually find pleasure in. That's something called anhedonia, uh,
Right.
feelings of worthlessness, and then of many times people with experiencing depression will have thoughts about death or suicide,
Right.
and one of the biggest risks for that is a feeling of hopelessness or helpless,
Mhm.
like
Right.
when you feel as though this is the way that things are and it's never going to change, it's never going to get better. That's when we really get concerned about some of those feelings.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And so be careful with all four. Okay. It's all scary. But remember, most of us are going through this. Over half report that they're having these feelings. So it's nothing to be embarrassed about. You're not the only one struggling with these issues. But as I said, I have to take some airplane flights and I'm a little bit anxious about those. And we're going to be returning to work and we're all a little bit anxious about that. None of our clothes fit anymore. We're a little bit anxious about that. I I don't. There's a funny commercial that I saw yesterday where two people. It was for chewing gum or something, and these two people come out, and he's got a beard and hair, and he's in his bathrobe. They're in a public park, but he's still dressed like he's not having to go out. But it's true. We're all going to be struggling for a while. Okay. Eventually, our brains are going to recalibrate, and we're going to get used to a new set of circumstances. But in the meantime, we're going to be a little bit down. We're going to be a little bit anxious. We might have some panic attacks, but we're all going through it together. So push through it, get the help that you need, stay close to others, rely on family and friends. But get help if you need it. If you get stuck, particularly if you get stuck, get help somewhere.
Yeah, that's the big key, is that if you're experiencing any of those signs of anxiety or panic attacks or depression or suicidal
Mhm.
thoughts or anything like that, get some help. There's lots of one positive that has come out of all this is the increased availability of therapeutic services through teletherapy and things like that. So
Right.
get
Yeah.
some help and talk to somebody, and work through some of that, because it's
Yeah.
temporary, and we will get back to feeling a little bit more at ease about things.
Right. And at the very least, you're right, Bernie. At the very least, if you're concerned, call and say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Is this abnormal?
Right.
Okay, do I need to worry? And in most cases, it's going to be no, this is normal. Just keep doing what you're doing. In other cases, it's going to be yes, it sounds like you're stuck. So let's get together a few times. Mhm.
And so, and either way is okay. Either
Yeah,
way.
not a problem. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We're all going to go through it.
Yes, definitely. So, all right. Well, that is it for today. Until
Mhm.
next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.